Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. And today we are doing another review on the micro brand Lorier. Now, if you're not familiar with Lorier, last year, back in 2018, they very much were the breakout success story when it came to micro brand divers with their Neptune, which I subsequently added to my own collection. And here's mine. I went for the gilt dial, as you can see there. Just a fantastic vintage inspired, really tastefully done, solid, and very affordable dive watch. I just fell in love, and instantly from seeing the pictures online, but then I had to investigate further. Unequivocally the best micro brand diver released of 2018. 2017 was very much for NTH, in my opinion. Who knows what 2019 will bring? Will they be able to hold on to that crown of the best micro brand diver? They're very affordable as well. I think this was about $400. Anyway, before I get into their new releases, which I have here, which I'm extremely excited about, I'll do a wristwatch check, and I'm wearing my beloved Breitling Navitimer there. Yes, it is big. It's big for me, but this was one of the few watches out there that is supposed to be big. Always was intended to be a big watch. Anyway, yeah, my favorite chronograph without a shadow of a doubt. So, wristwatch check done. Let's just do a little bit of background on Lorier. If you're not familiar with the brand, it's a husband and wife team. They were in Texas last year, but now they've moved back to NYC. It's Lorenzo and Lauren there, and they started the brand last year just out of a love and passion for watches, which is always it's always the best way to go, isn't it? So off the success of the Neptune, they followed up with a string of releases, including the Falcon, which I believe is like a smooth, bezeled, kind of everyday watch, and then another diver, which again we have a Greek mythology-based name. So introducing the Hydra. There we go. So there are two colors. There's this blue, which we'll discuss in just a moment, and I've kept it on the original bracelet. And then we have the black dial and bezel. Now, before we go over the basic specifications, I just want to point out something about the packaging, which I really do appreciate. They come with a watch roll, as well as a spring bar tool, and I believe a choice of two straps. And this is something I really do appreciate, and just typifies the attention to detail that Lorier put into their watches. This is the first NATO strap I've ever experienced that is very, very reminiscent and faithful to the original NATO strap released way back by the Ministry of Defense. When was it? I think was it 69 or 70? Well, I can't remember, but anyway, I did a video all about it. I should remember. Quite appalling that I don't, but anyway. And it was by a company called Phoenix. Now, if you've ever seen a Phoenix strap, I own a couple. The material, the thickness, the feel of the nylon is exceedingly similar to this. It's almost uncanny. In fact, if you etched Phoenix on it, I probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Again, the devil really is in the detail with Lorier. So they know their historic references so well, and not only in the strap but also into the watches themselves, which we'll now discuss. So let's just get the basic specifications out of the way. We'll start with, as always, dimensions. So the diameter is 39 millimeters, same as before. We have quite a tall height of 15.3 millimeters. Lug to lug is 48, and then a lug width of 20 millimeters. So in terms of scale, let me just double check. Yeah, it's pretty much the same as before. The only change is the height of the plexiglass. So we have this super domed plexiglass, and it is different from before. If we hold them side by side, you can see, whereas before it was more of a, if we use the architectural term, a curvetto style curve and then flat on the top. This time the curvature is a little bit more pronounced, and it sits taller, even more exaggerated. And at first I thought it was just the markers, because the markers have obviously changed, that they've got longer the distortions were different, but no, we've got a different plexiglass. The case is entirely stainless steel, brushed sides, drilled lug holes, beautiful beveled edges, very similar to the kind of layer Omegas of the 1950s, late 1950s, early 60s. That wonderfully articulating tapering bracelet that I just love. This is exactly the same. Solid end links, screw down case back. On the bracelet we have the double push button deployant with the etched I call it the Sergeant insignia logo, which is very military-esque. Pins for the links, which is to be expected at this price range. I love the bracelet. The bracelet really was a success story for me, and I've always worn it on the bracelet. I've never actually taken my Neptune off yet. We have the same polishing, echoing the case, the beveled edges on the clasp. Your clasp is the standard affair. Unfortunately, we only get 2 micro adjustments, but the links are quite small. They're 3-piece links, so you can get quite a decent fit. The finishing on the case is exactly the same as before. Really nice transitions, sharp edges, clearly defined contrast from the polished to the brushed. The bezel insert sits flat, accentuating that curvature of the crystal. The addition of drilled lug holes definitely makes it a strap monster. It's something that a classic design like this is always going to be compatible with a lot more strap options. The bezel is 120 click unidirectional. Yep, it lines up very nicely. There's not that much play. Again, this is a sub $400 watch, so you know I'm very satisfied with that. Beautiful coin edge. It doesn't overhang. I think it matches the case wonderfully. This time we have an acrylic insert, and they've actually loomed up the markers, which is very impressive. The luminescence is Swiss Luminova BGW9. I'll include a loom shot, a date at the 6 o'clock on the main dial. The same handset, although this time for the seconds hand. Believe it or not, this was actually inspired by the SKX 013, which I also own. The white arrow hand. I love the hour hand. We have that very 1957 broad arrow, also gilt in a brushed finish. We have an oversized screw down crown with a coin edge, inspired by the Rolex 6538, as is the little bit of red text we see on the dial. While stylistically nothing like the 6538 Submariner, the scale is, it threads very nicely and securely, and operating the watch is very efficient. A double marker for the 12, and I love how it ever so slightly kind of matches the Sergeant insignia of Lorier, almost as if they're about to interconnect there. The markers are quite 3-dimensional, generously applied, with a shorter marker to make way for the date at 6 o'clock. This is a big difference between the Neptune, is that we do have the added date complication. The date window is a very slight trapezium shape. It matches the movement that the markers pointing inwards give. The date is positioned symmetrically at 6, gives it a very handsome balance to the dial. The printing on the dial is exquisitely done. Even the markers are framed with gilt, extremely precise. The black dial version is exactly the same with the gilt minute graduations, and if you notice, the actual date window is beautifully framed in gold. A subtle touch, but very nicely done. The date wheels also match the different colors, so black for the black dial and blue for the blue. The blue is actually, I would say it's a royal blue. Unlike the blue they used on the Neptune, it's a bit more brighter. I would describe it actually as a glossy admiral blue, and the color is exact to correspond with the bezel. The bezel insert this time, instead of numerals as we had on the Neptune there, they've gone for just plain markers that differentiate for the 12, 3, 6, and 9, with graduations in the first 15 minutes. Now, this was deliberate. It was inspired by the Breitling Super Ocean reference 1004. And the absence of numerals also give it a secondary feature of you can, in a very rudimentary fashion, track a second time zone. It's not the most efficient way of doing it, obviously, because it's unidirectional, but it is possible, something you can't really do with the numerals. The new domed plexiglass, although some might criticize it for being very prone to scratches, it really accentuates the detail on the dial, and there's beautiful distortions as you move it, much more exaggerated than the Neptune. It's going to have a bit of a Marmite effect, but it is very indicative of watches of the era that this very much is inspired by. The acrylic insert also has a slight Bakelite-esque quality. That was very prevalent in that era as well. And orientation with the lume is pretty good, especially more so on the dial. The lume on the bezel is a little bit of a disappointment, not as bright, but you got to bear in mind it's not as applied as much as it is on the dial. The markers are really quite exaggerated. They extend quite far into the center. The only differentiation in color is the 200 meter water resistant rating is written in red. Even the font is very Submariner-esque. A subtle touch that, if you know your vintage references, you're going to get. But at the same time, this is obviously not another blatant Submariner homage. This is very much its own thing. So again, the movement inside is the Seiko NH35A. Automatic, of course, operating at 21,600 vibrations an hour. It's a 24 joule movement. We've got the Deer shock protection, 41-hour power reserve, bidirectional winding. You've got the magic lever in there. If I unscrew the screw-down crown and pull it out all the way, it is hackable. If I pop it to the first position, we have manual wind. And if I put it to the second position, we get quick set there on the date. The NH35 is basically a hand-windable hacking upgrade from the NH25. These are the world's most popular automatic movements and widely used in microbrands. So it's no surprise. And I think that's great because you're getting a rock-solid movement, very affordable to maintain. They go for absolute donkey's years without a service. And they operate at that slower speed, so there's less friction in the moving parts. You just don't have to worry about it. The only slight issue is, of course, you're not going to get the most cutting-edge accuracy. Generally, they're about minus 20 to plus 40 seconds a day under normal conditions. I know that sounds quite extreme, but I've never actually seen one that operates that badly. These, I'm happy to report, were both operating at about plus 8, plus 9. My little Neptune is an absolute trooper, and I have had it regulated, and when regulated, they're capable of performing plus within COSC even. But what you're really getting with these movements is that ever redoubtable, reliable assurance that they're going to perform and for a long time. So the big question is, how do these bad boys wear? Well, let's pop it on the wrist and find out. So there we go. Now for me, I have a 6 1/4 inch wrist. The lugs are quite long. They almost protrude to the very extremities of my wrist. However, for the small wrist, medium wrist, in fact, actually, this is very much a crowd pleaser size. I think I can get away with it. It does sit a bit better on the bracelet. Merely because the bracelet positions the watch a little bit securely. It's one of those bracelets that if you have got the smaller wrist, it's going to be a bit more comfortable. There's not that much curvature on those lugs, and it does sit quite noticeably taller than its cousin there, the Neptune. The weight is about 155 grams on the bracelet. Off the bracelet, it's about 65 grams. It is a very comfortable watch. It's not heavy, it's not domineering, and it has a lovely elegance, especially as you move it. You see all the that beautiful beveling play with the light. It certainly looks and feels more expensive than it really is. And I think importantly, it does give off that vintage vibe. The scale is traditional, and is something that Lorier was certainly kind of, on the crest of the wave. Everybody's catching up now doing smaller watches, but they were very much ahead of that. In fact, let's discuss the positives and negatives. Okay, so let's start off with the positives first. Well, undoubtedly, the value for money is there. For the $399 price, you get a hell of a lot of watch for that money. They even give some of the proceeds to charity for cleaning up oceans. It's a very accessible price range. What is wonderful about these classically styled watches is that they're versatile in their application. Great for adventures, whether it's in a pool or you're going sailing or something like that, and at the same time elegant enough for everyday use. They give off quite a masculine feel. They definitely evoke the feeling of vintage watches without the risk associated with vintage watches or the sometimes exorbitant price range, especially with the rarer models. I love the range of influences. It manages to pull it off and encapsulate a little bit of that Breitling Super Ocean, a little bit of that Submariner feel, a little bit of, what else is in here? You've even got nods to the classic SKX with that seconds hand, and the straps, referencing classic, the very first historic NATO strap. Obviously something made and designed by a true enthusiast, and I think it's a micro brand for the enthusiast. I love Lorier. I love what they're doing. It's very tastefully done, and I think it will remain a classic. However, there are negatives. First of all, I love the name Hydra. I love Neptune. Obviously, I love Greek mythology. I think there was a missed opportunity to use that ever so iconic image of the Hydra. If you're not familiar with Greek mythology, the Hydra was a multi-headed serpentine water monster. I think the legend goes if you cut off one head, two will grow back, etc. So it would have been nice to see it or see some kind of engraving representation on the back. It's a bit of a missed opportunity because it's such a wonderful, iconic image, one that's been immortalized many times over in classic art. You only have to go to the Uffizi to see what I'm saying. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about the colors. They definitely got the colors spot on, but where it lacks a little bit is the lume. I was disappointed by the lume in the bezel. Yes, it's nice that it's there. Again, it's very difficult to criticize because we've got to remember the price point. And this is something that people tend to say a lot about micro brands, is they say, well, for $400 you can get a much better Seiko. Well, of course you can, because Seiko have the infrastructure, they have the factories, the entirely in-house self-sufficient production capabilities to make something very competitive. However, with Lorier you're getting something different, and that is the flip side. You're not getting just another Seiko diver that is like all the others. That's ultimately the great appeal about micro brands, is you're getting something a little bit more individualistic, a little bit more unique. So yes, while it can't compete in terms of what it offers, well, nothing can really compete with what Seiko offers at the entry level. I do think you still get a lot of value for money. And the fact that they're even able to give some of the proceeds away to charity is very admirable. I'm surprised they even are able to make a profit. That criticism, in my opinion, is null and void. My last and final criticism has to be the height. It's going to turn some people off. They are really tall. I mean, I think about 2 or 3 millimeters taller than the Neptune. I mean, the Neptune really was pushing it, but I'm willing to forgive it for that lovable domed crystal. I think this one, it's a shame it's not a bit thinner. That was my main issue. I mean, it's still an alluring watch, still fun and great to wear, but certainly on the statuesque side to its more graceful predecessor, the Neptune. So in conclusion, a wonderful addition to the Lorier family. I'm really pleased they stuck with this scale. The only exception being the height. Slight disappointment there. But if it does it for you, these are cracking watches. They still have that same lovable, striking look and presence that the Neptune had. Am I going to upgrade? No, I'm still happy with my first generation of Neptune. I think they've been slightly updated I think they've made the dial a bit wider and the bezel, but you know, I'm over the moon with my Neptune and I do wear it often. If you want something that gives you the feeling of, let's say, a Black Bay, Tudor Black Bay, or a classic Submariner, this one very much gave me that Bond feel, strangely enough. You know, that classic Dr. No kind of Submariner feel, and it itches that scratch, but without having to fork out you know, heaven and earth to afford it. Ultimately, a worthy addition to the Lorier lineup. Do I think it's better than the Neptune? No, well, it's a question of taste. Ultimately, personally, I think the Neptune was always a home run. Have Lorier done it again and made the best micro brand diver for 2019? Well, we'll have to wait until the end of the year to see. They've played it safe here. They haven't deviated too much from the design of the Neptune, which I think is a good thing. It still retains a lot of my favorite features, like that tapering bracelet, but unfortunately it doesn't bring anything new to the table at the same time. So it's a tricky thing to balance, but all the same, a cracking watch. It's still miles ahead of many micro brand divers out there. I still highly recommend it. It definitely gets the pure class seal of approval from me. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Please don't forget to add your thoughts, queries, comments, opinions, all the rest of it down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful. And as always, guys, I will catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao.
This is a public service reminder for the good Gentry. Please follow us on Instagram, join the Facebook UGWC group, and click on the bell to keep notified of new videos. Don't forget to keep it positive, keep it Gentry, onwards and upwards. Thank you.